Hi everyone, my name is Corey Hagewood and I will be conducting today's feature focus on the custom SQL variable in TracerPlus. So essentially what the custom SQL variable allows you to do is it allows you to run your own custom SQL statements on the database that's on the device holding your data. And this could be a pretty powerful feature. You can do a lot of different things with it. It really just depends on how you configure that SQL and what exactly you're trying to do. So in this particular demo, what I've done is I've set up a pretty simple form here with 4 data fields: our part number, location, description, and quantity. And then we have our 3 SQL statements that we're going to do in this particular app, which we're going to be doing an insert into session 2, an update into session 2, and then we're going to grab the count from session 2, which is going to be the record count of how many records are in there. So to kind of explain how I've done this, let's take a look at our field settings here. Fields 1 through 4 are just basic text fields that are just set up to hold our data. And then we have the other fields here being our SQL variable fields. So if we look at the insert first here, you'll notice that it's set to a field type of variable, and if we go to our variable options, we have the variable type set to SQL. So really the two things to keep in mind when doing a SQL variable is the custom SQL section, which is going to essentially give you a space to supply the SQL that you want to execute, and then the trigger field, which is going to be the field that an action needs to occur in for this SQL to fire. So in this case, we have our insert statement configured here, and we have it configured to activate by our insert trigger field. So a couple of key things to keep in mind with the syntax of the SQL variable in TracerPlus. You're always going to reference the generic table name. So in this case, we want to post our record to our inventory session, which is our session 2. But in the statement, we're just going to reference that by saying session 2. The same thing goes for the fields. In this case, we want our part number, location, description, and quantity. But to reference those, we're just going to say fields 1 through 4. And then on the bottom here, this is what we call the field token. And all this is really saying is just take the value in the associated fields display. So whatever value is displayed on the form for these fields is what we'll be inserting here. And this is through the field index. So this first one here of 0 is actually referring to the value held in the display of field 1. And likewise, number 3 here is the value of the display in field 4. So that's pretty much it for the configuration of this insert. Like I said, another thing to keep in mind is you do need a trigger field. So I have set up a insert trigger, which essentially is just used for that. If we go back to our form designer here, the way I'm going to trigger this is through this insert button. This is just a field input button that is set to do an after scan in our insert trigger. Essentially just forcing that SQL to fire when we hit the button. So I'm going to deploy this to our device and kind of demonstrate how that SQL variable for insert can be used to insert a record into our session 2, even though we're entering it into session 1. Okay, so in this case, let's add a item to our inventory. It's going to be maybe a pair of shoes, and let's say we have 15 of them. And so what I'm going to do at this point is, now that I've filled out the form, I'm going to hit my insert button, and in our SQL insert field here, it'll return the record count of the session that we're working with, to kind of indicate that it was a successful insert. So we have a 1 there, which means there's 1 record in there currently. So if we go back and take a look at our view data for our inventory, we can kind of see that the record has been inserted into this session. Without ever having to go to this session, we were able to insert a record. So that is one of the benefits of using the SQL variables to control your inserts whenever you really want to wherever you really want to. So with that said, let's go back and let's take a look at the update SQL and see how that one's configured. So just like before, it's set to a SQL variable type field. We have another field here used as the trigger. This is the update trigger field. And then here's our update SQL statement here. And just like before, we're referencing the session through its generic name of session 2, and we're referencing the fields through their generic names as well, field 1 through 4. The difference here is because it's an update, the actual configuration of this is slightly different. If you've done SQL before, you should know what the difference between a update and a insert is. In this particular case, we're using a where clause for a part number. And so likewise, we have another field input button here set up to activate this particular SQL statement. So if we go back to our device now, and we can enter that same part number, we'll enter the same location and the same description. But let's say instead of the amount we had before, now we have 80 of them. So we want to update this record instead of just inserting it as a new one. So we'll hit our update button. We still get that record count of 1, and if we go back to our data view here, we'll notice that the quantity has changed to 80 instead of what it was previously. And lastly, I just want to show the count function. So if we take a look at that particular field here, this is a pretty simple one. This is just running a count on our session 2. So likewise, it has its own trigger field, which we are activating through another field input button. And if we go on our device here, and we actually don't have to fill out the top here at all on this one. We can just hit the count. It'll tell us we have 1. Just to kind of demonstrate how that works, let's add a different item, maybe pants this time. We'll insert it, and then we'll count again, and now we have 2 there to indicate that we have 2 records in that session. So that's pretty much how the SQL variable works in TracerPlus. Another important thing to note is we do support other functions. Just like the count function, we support sums and other things like that. So really the power is there to kind of do whatever you need to do through the SQL. And another thing to note is in our conditional logic, which was introduced in version 9, it is also possible to set up SQL actions in here. We have a execute SQL action, and this would work very similarly to the variable, only you can set different events to trigger it. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because this logic menu is covered in a previous feature focus. But I just want you guys to know that you can also trigger your SQL through the logic if for whatever reason the variable is not flexible enough for you. So that pretty much sums up the demonstration for today. As always, if you guys have any questions, you can always shoot us an email at support@tracerplus.com. Thank you very much.